Good day everyone, my name is Navneet Anand from aajKal, local and global. Today in studio I have got Mr. Harish Prasad, who's got over 33 years of experience as a solicitor and lawyer. Mr. Prasad, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Navneet. It's always a pleasure to be here.
You know, with the wealth of experience that you have in the field that you deal with the courts on a regular basis, we were just doing an interview, I think, around a week before, and we were talking about the elections happening in Fiji, and you made some predictions. How satisfied are you with the prediction that you made on that day?
I think I was fairly close to the mark. At the same time, it was quite surprising. The results were in Fiji after the elections. So let's talk about it, because it's become a very interesting and hot topic amongst at least the Fiji people.
We talk about the results. Now I think we are going to get a new Prime Minister in Fiji, Mr. Rambuka.
Looks like, yeah. Looks like he's
talking about his history in the background. Yeah. What do you think? How would he prove to be the Prime Minister, head of the state?
Well, look, Fiji's got a history of people with military backgrounds, or people who are responsible for upheavals and coups, who subsequently became Prime Minister. So Bainimarama came from a similar background, so Rambuka is the same. But things have changed, and things have progressed quite a bit from those days, and I think people can look forward to the future with a lot of positivity now, I think.
What difference do you see with Bainimarama as the Prime Minister or Rambuka as the Prime Minister of the country?
Well, Rambuka was Prime Minister for some time, and I think he's much more a mature person. His views have moderated quite a bit, and he's proven already by forming a coalition with the National Federation Party that he's willing to work with every community in Fiji. So I think all the signs are very positive. What
could be the real reason the sitting government loses in the elections and give a chance to the opposition to come in the power itself?
I think we touched on this on the last interview, and I
want you to rephrase it.
Well, it's quite odd when we did that interview, and as you know, on social media you get a lot of feedback. And you could see that a lot of people were quite sensitive about some of the criticisms I had. I mean, as I've said to you before, I live here in Australia. I have an interest in politics in Fiji. I think I follow it fairly closely. And I think the criticisms were well founded. And in fact, what people can say that's probably the reason why Fiji First has failed to form government this time. And I'm not going to repeat it, but my view, which is supported by so many other people, is that there was one person within the Fiji First, or the government, that made the government quite unpopular, and I think that's been proven from the results that came out.
You know, talking about the criticism, when I was going through some of the comments from various members of the community there in Fiji as well, what they were saying is, the nationals, who were the Fiji nationals in the past, are living abroad at the moment, must not come and talk and discuss the politics of Fiji. So what's your take on that?
Well, look, there's so many people that live outside of Fiji now. It's one of those countries where people have left, but they still have a very close connection, and I'm one of those people. So as long as you're well sort of versed with what's going on, as long as you know what you're talking about. I mean, I'm not an expert, but I read a lot and I listen to other people, so my views are formed based on all the inquiries that I make, and I'm entitled to have opinions as well.
With the new government coming in, taking oath, what do you think, how would it impact on Australia-Fiji bilateral relations to start with?
Well, as I said to you last time, this government will be more inclined to work with Australia than the previous government was. But let's just look at the governments and how the parties, how they've panned out. Now, as you know, there were three major parties, you can call, that were really contesting the election. The fourth one I'll come to in a minute. But as you know, the Bainimarama's government is the Fiji First, and then there is Rambuka's government, which is party, which is the People's Alliance, and then there is the if you like, the traditional Indian party, which was the National Federation Party. So they're the major contestants, and as I predicted last time, that the government would depend on some form of coalition with other parties. So the People's Alliance, or the government that is coming in now, had already formed a coalition with NFP. Fiji First, which is Bainimarama's party, has never had the need for a coalition because they always managed to get majority. Now, what's happened this time is they failed to get a majority, so they got 26 seats. They needed to have 28, and the Rambuka's party and the NFP, they managed in coalition managed to get 26 as well. So they're evenly poised. Now, the trump in the card then was the Sodelpa, which is the old traditional Fijian party. They didn't hold a lot of hope. I didn't think that they would make much of a difference, but they managed to get 3 seats. Now, the interesting thing, of course, is you have to have at least 5% of the total votes to get a seat in Parliament, and they managed to get in just above 5, so they managed to get 3. Now, needless to say, they became kingmakers. So they went to and fro between the two sides and said, who's going to offer us more and who's going to sort of meet our demands. Things are not that clear yet, what demands were made or what demands were accepted. But in the end, only yesterday, they decided to join in with NFP and People's Alliance. And now they've got a coalition of 3 parties, and Bainimarama and his party is now out, so they're going to be opposition. Now, having said all this, things are still quite raw in Fiji. Things can still change. As we all know, Fiji politics can change any time. So let's wait and see. I think it's going to be very interesting days and weeks and months ahead.
Well, talking about the democratic system of the country, 3 parties coming together and forming the government. How safe would be the interest of the country having 3 different parties with 3 different ideologies coming together and forming the government?
Well, that's never easy, whether it's in Fiji or in Australia.
On the other side, when I look into it, Bainimarama government, they're being in power for quite some time. Yeah, when they will be sitting in the opposition, definitely the opposition is going to be strong enough to point out on the government itself. Being born in Fiji, now in Australia for over 3 decades, what does your experience say with the new government coming in, with the new member of parliaments coming in power? How much experience do they already have in administration?
Look, they probably have as much experience as the other people did. We've got the Indian leader, who's Harish Prasad. He's a professor in economics, so he'd be a perfect person to deal with the economy of the country. Rambuka has previously been Prime Minister, so there's enough experience there. And in fact, I believe that there'll be more consultation, there'll be more qualified members of parliament and ministers than the previous government did, because as you recall, my criticism, and of course other people who criticized the last government, was that there was one person who was controlling everything. There's no secret about that, it's an open secret, and that's, I think, been the reason for the downfall. I mean, they always underestimated how strongly people felt about the way this government was being run by a single person, and it had to happen. I think they've been there long enough.
This is what is normally called the power of the common man.
Yes, well, there's always a day where the elections make all the difference. People choose who they want, and it shows that democracy works to that extent. Where, to be honest, the system works. And that's been proven. I mean, it's a good thing that there's a number of parties, because then people get to choose. And while it's not an ideal situation for governments to be dependent on coalitions and things like that, there's more accountability. There's more people that they have to answer to, except rather than a situation where a government basically imposes whatever it wants on the people and no one is able to oppose it. And by and large, that's what seemed to happen.
You know, hope sustains life, and what all I wish is the country to flourish to the level what the people of the country deserve, to get all their rights in their lap. Talking about bilateral relationships, we talked Fiji and Australia. What do you think it's going to impact on India and Fiji bilateral relationships?
Oh, I think it's going to become stronger. We've got an Indian party or Indian-dominated party that's part of the government now. But look, the great thing is our constitution is pretty well balanced. So people do fear that certain things can happen. But I honestly believe that we've progressed a lot since the last coups and all that, and people have matured. We've got a younger generation who understand what due process and governments and all that is about. So I don't think people need to fear that there could be more upheavals. I honestly don't believe that that's going to be the case this time.
Me sitting here in Australia from the media side of it, without being biased, all I would say, whoever comes in the government and serve the public to a level that public is happy to choose them once again coming in power. With number three, with the 3 seats, who were the kingmakers, we never know what's going to happen in the future. Would they continue with Rembuka or would they shift to Bainimarama's side? Time will tell.
Exactly.
But as of now, with Rembuka's party coming in power and him being the Prime Minister of the country, what do you think is going to happen in next 1 week, 3 months and 12 months?
Well, that's anyone's guess. I mean, there's always volatility in Fiji, volatility in the sense that governments always have upheavals, and this time there's a greater chance of that happening because there are 3 parties trying to get their heads together and have some common purpose. It's not going to be easy. Things can change. I mean, any one of the 3 parties can decide that they no longer want to be part of it, and then we're looking at perhaps another election at some stage if governments aren't able to pass their bills and things like that. And that's what happens in every country. We went through that in Australia some years ago as well, when the federal government was dictated by a number of independents. So it's a similar situation in Fiji.
Before I wrap up, what would be your thoughts on the overall process that has happened or what's going to happen in the near future?
What I'm hoping is that we're going to have more open government, and there's going to be more involvement of other people, other ministers. There's going to be a joint effort of members of parliament in taking the country forward rather than the vision of one person, which appeared to be the case for a number of years now. So that's what a true democratic system is supposed to look like. Have competent people in different portfolios who are able to make decisions without being told by a single person what should happen. So I think that's my wish.
Look, thank you so much, Mr. Prasad, with coming up your viewpoint on the elections in Fiji. This is Navneet Anand signing out for Fiji Times, India Times, Australia. Mr. Prasad, once again, thank you so much.
It's always my pleasure.
Thank you.
See you.
Fiji Times. Be with the times.